On Wednesday last week, Fed Chair Jerome Powell gave a very somber report about the state of the economy. He said that additional fiscal support is going to be required to avoid lasting damage to the global economy. And that promptly sent markets like the Dow down 500 points on a pretty bearish outlook. Now, Powell followed up his speech with an interview on 60 Minutes last night, where he made comments that served to underscore the importance of the digital scarcity that has been hard-coded into the Bitcoin protocol. Now, if we take a look at this Market Watch story, which covers Powell's appearance on 60 Minutes last night, Powell claimed that the Fed has, quote, no limit, end quote, to the ammunition and firepower that they can bring to the economic fight in order to mitigate the mounting financial turmoil. This, of course, harkens back, I think, last month when the previous representative of, I believe it was the New York Fed, appeared and said there's an unlimited amount of money at the Fed, right? And as many crypto enthusiasts will tell you, the more ammunition that the Fed exhausts, the better that is for Bitcoin. In their attempt to ease the widespread concerns of the American people over the future of the United States economy, Fed Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell on CBS News' 60 Minutes program yesterday, he came and explained what is being done to try and avoid the next Great Depression. Powell claimed there was no limit to what they would do to help stimulate the economy. Keep in mind, they only control interest rates and print money. But this was a bid to assuage fears of the audience, right? And Powell was pretty bold, saying, we're not out of ammunition, not by a long shot. Said the central bank could lower interest rates, change its asset purchase strategy, and issue additional stimulus to small businesses and individuals struggling during the outbreak, regardless of the fact that the majority of the SBA loans and PPPs were snatched up by larger corporations that relatively shouldn't need them as opposed to small businesses. But all of this, of course, is adding up on the ever-growing balance sheet of the Fed, which is fast approaching $7 trillion. And Powell addressed that deficit, stating that he hopes that they deal with that once the recovery is over and we get the pandemic resolved. Right? He said, quote, it is true the deficits are going to be big for a couple of years here, and we'll have to deal with that. The time to deal with that, though, is when we're through with this recovery, he said. So just like back in 2008, they're going to push the deficits under the table. They're going to push the gaping holes in our economic monetary system under the table. Now, Mark Justra, he wrote in a op-ed piece here, he described the United States dollar as being on its final act. In an argument very familiar to many crypto fans and gold bugs, he highlighted how history reveals global reserve currencies to always fall out of power every 100 years or so. And as he so keenly pointed out, the collapse of a national currency is almost always precipitated by overspending on wars, overconsumption, excessive debt, and easy credit. Went on to note that the Fed is now the only buyer U.S. government debt, and describes that their recent economic intervention efforts is pretty much the bad guy throwing his gun at the protagonist when he runs out of bullets. All right, I love that quote. That's a good one. How he claimed that it's just a mathematical certainty. The Fed will never, ever be able to normalize interest rates and will never unwind its bloated balance sheet. The truth is, the Fed's ammo is going to run out, or it's going to become as ineffective as an empty or jammed firearm. If the United States starts dying, and if it is on its final act, another mathematical certainty could provide the perfect solution, right? Unlike the dollar that can be devalued with each new printing of fresh fiat, only 21 million Bitcoin will ever exist. Likely even less, given how much has been lost to time and the fact that individuals will always lose their Bitcoin. In fact, Satoshi wrote about this early in the Bitcoin Talk forum. Somebody said, well, actually the supply will just continue to contract because there's always going to be people who lose their Bitcoin. And Satoshi wrote, yeah, just consider it a donation to the value of everybody else's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is contactless, right? So great for pandemics. It's controlled by no third party. Policymakers like Powell cannot push off fiscal responsibility to future generations to deal with later. Remember that interest is, taxation on generations that are yet to be born. Bitcoin came out of the 2008 financial crisis, the last major recession, as a means to give people an opportunity to get away from the economic suffering and loss of savings and investment at the hands of government and central bankers like Powell, like the system that we have right now. And the time is approaching for a change of the guard. And it's due in terms of a global reserve currency. We need a major shakeup, and it's dawning on most of the world's economies. And Bitcoin has mathematical certainty that gold does not have. That's its most appealing attribute at this time. I mean, not to mention, right? Another thing that we need to be wary of, I wanted to cover this as well, right? The alternative to this is if we look over at what's happening in the East, okay? Here's why I'm an advocate for Bitcoin, right? Not only do we have mathematical certainty with Bitcoin, Not only can we avoid the actual damage to our livelihoods with a sound form of money, there are far worse alternatives out there that are being proposed. For example, a central bank digital currency and China's DCEP, digital currency electronic payment system. That I covered this report last week and was fairly critical of it about, I can't remember who wrote it. The commentator was saying that, well, they don't have any plans to spread this worldwide. This is going to be localized. Okay. China has a very aggressive agenda to push the DCEP out. China has a very aggressive agenda to spread its global policy out. And if you want to take a look at recent reporting from Hong Kong, right? So I'm going to link these in the description down below after I post the video. But again, we just had a huge, basically physical fight where pro Hong Kong Democrats were thrown out of the legislative session, and the authority of the legislative session was usurped by a pro-Beijing, pro-China, pro-CCP cabinet member who was taking illegitimate control over the session. Literally, people were physically thrown out. Here's a video. I'll link all this down in the description below. So these are things that Western-style democracy has, for all of its faults, Western-style democracy has attempted to mitigate and push us away from authoritarianism, from centralized, authoritative, violent command and control. And our second most powerful superpower in the world right now utilizes violent, authoritative command and control tactics and concepts. And their philosophy maximizes the state over the individual. And this is everything that Western philosophy attempts to break away from. Gives us a framework for freedom and liberty. Democracy, freedom, and liberty were born out of these traditions. And Bitcoin is based on these same principles. Decentralization, liberty, freedom. They are conducive to that. They allow that. We cannot let this die. The future of the human species is by no means guaranteed. And if we revert to this cycle of totalitarian control, fascism, or centralized control, which has worked, has kept us alive for thousands of years, it's not a model that's going to work anymore. It is unable to get us above and crest beyond our greatest threats, the greatest threats to the human species, which are basically being centralized on one planet. Sound money, democracy, freedom, liberty, these things can bring us together and allow us to, look at the advancements in science and technology that have come out of freedom. Look at how far the human species has come. Look at how the global standard of living has been raised by investing in human liberty and decency. And anybody that points to the contrary is missing the thread, man. Like, we have a chance to get off of this rock, to decentralize our genes across the stars. We have a chance to peer in and understand the laws of physics. We already understand pretty much all the laws of physics that govern our day-to-day life. We are building technology that improves our form of daily life. We are starting to delve into the nature of consciousness itself with artificial intelligence. None of that is going to come out or be utilized well with a centralized command and control style government or model or money system. It's not going to happen. You're going to see regression. And we're not for regression. We're for moving forward. We're for pushing forward. So I'll leave these links in the description down below. You get a choice on what side of history you want to be on, right? You can be a coward and say, well, I am afraid to face the cold, dark uncertainty of existence on my own, so I'm going to suck into the hive and let Big Daddy government tell me what to do. And if they want to put their boot on my neck once in a while, that's okay. It's worth the price to pay. I'll let them rip my kid out of my arms and take my wife and let them do what they want. Or you can choose to be on the right side of history, which is scary and dangerous, and you're breaking new frontiers, where you say, you know what? I think that human life and liberty is valuable in and of itself, and I think that we should create a model that preserves and promotes that, right? I think Bitcoin follows along in those same paths. I think Bitcoin is a route to improve that. Bitcoin is a means to an end. It's a means to a better society. It's not a means in and of itself. And I think that personal responsibility and liberty is the most important thing that we can vie for as a species. Let me know your thoughts in the section down below, guys. This is pretty heavy stuff, but this is the stuff you need to be thinking of, because we're at an inflection point in the world, right? We are at an inflection point, man. Everybody's so happy to rah, 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 let the dollar go down. What's going to replace it? What's going to replace it? Is the cure worse than the disease? In the case of a CBDC, I'd say yes. In the case of a decentralized crypto, I think not. I think that's a pretty darn good cure.